During our previous chapters, we had a quick overview about Liferay mobile strategies, and we talked about how to develop mobile website using either responsive design or mobile detection rules. In this video, we will talk more about the second approach, which is building mobile application. As we mentioned previously, to build a mobile application, you can use the native technologies to build your native application, or you can do hybrid development by using web technologies to build native application. In this chapter, we will cover only the native approach, and in the next one, we will cover the hybrid approach. For the native approach, we do provide Liferay Screens and Liferay Mobile SDK. Since Liferay Screens is built on the top of Mobile SDK, we will discuss only Liferay Screens here. Liferay Screens is a set of ready-to-use components. We call it Screenlet. You can use Liferay Screens inside your native application during development, and that allows you to connect your native application to your Liferay instance. Liferay Screens allow you to use assets, rules, resources that you created inside your Liferay instance, and you can use that inside your native application. You get a lot of good things about that. For example, first, you minimize the development time by having out-of-the-box component that manage the networking logic to send requests to your Liferay instance and to interpret the responses. Also, it has a ready-made UI layer to render those requests, as we're gonna see in our demo. Second, since all assets, content, rules are coming from one place, which is your Liferay instance, you will be able to manage your desktop and mobile channels from one place. Example to those screenlets can be Web Content Display Screenlet, which show web content from your Liferay instance into your native application. DDL Form Screenlet, which shows dynamic forms from your Liferay instance inside your native application. Image Gallery Screenlet, which shows a list of images from a folder inside your document repository. Liferay Screens started with only 9 screenlet in version 1. Then in version 2, they became 20 screenlet. Last year, we released Liferay Screens version 3. We added one more screenlet, but actually the very powerful one. It's for hybrid development. We will talk about this screenlet in the next chapter. As a high-level architecture, Liferay Screens is composed of a core, a screenlet layer, a view layer, interactors, and server connectors. Let me give you a very quick summary for each component. First, the interactors. It facilitates the communication between the screenlet layer and Liferay Mobile SDK. Second, Screenlet Core. It includes all the base classes for developing other Screenlet components. It acts as a micro framework that let developer write their own Screenlet. Third, Screenlet. It's Liferay implementation for the Screenlet core. As we mentioned before, we have 21 Screenlet in Liferay Screens version 3. Fourth, server connectors. They are a collection of classes that abstract away the complexity of communicating with different Liferay versions. This allows you to develop calls to APIs methods without worrying about the specific Liferay version. Fifth, views. It's a set of layouts and custom view classes that present Screenlet to the user in different themes. We will show every part during our demo. So now we will see how you can use Liferay screens with your native application. As an example, we will use screens with a native Android application, but the same steps that I will do here, it's the same for iOS native applications as well. So first, to connect your native application with your Liferay instance using screens, you will need two simple steps. First, as you can see on this slide, you will need to include Liferay screens dependencies element inside your build.gradle file. Second, and the last step, you will need to create a file called server_context.xml inside your values folder. Inside that file, you will need to include the server URL, company and group ID of your Liferay instance. We will see during our demo how you can get this information. In the next 3 slides, we will see how you can add Screenlet inside your native Android application. First, in your Android Studio, open the XML activity and insert the Screenlet into your activity or fragment layout. As my example here, I added the login Screenlet. Login Screenlet allow user to authenticate into the mobile application against Liferay user store. Next, set the Screenlet attributes. You can refer to the documentation for each Screenlet to know what attributes are mandatory or what attributes are supported. In this slide, you can see the attributes of the login Screenlet. To configure your application to listen to events that Screenlet trigger, you can implement the Screenlet listener interface in your activity or fragment class. We will see how to do that during our demo. In the next chapter, we will cover the second way of building mobile application, which is the hybrid approach. Let's jump on the demo and see how we can use Liferay screens inside a mobile native application. In this video, we will show how you can use Liferay screens with your Android native application to connect your native application to your Liferay instance. I will start from scratch so you can see how you can build an application and include Liferay screens in a very easy steps. So I'm gonna use my Android Studio and I'm gonna start a new project. I'll name my project Liferay DXP Demo, and I'm gonna make the domain to be Liferay Training Mobile. Next, I'll keep everything as default here, and finally I'm gonna start with one activity and it's gonna be empty. Next, I will name the first activity to be activity main. Finish. And now Android Studio is actually building the project for me. Once the project is open, I need to do 2 main steps to make sure Liferay can connect to Liferay screens and be able to connect to Liferay instance. First, I need to include the dependencies of Liferay screens inside the file build.gradle. So that's how Liferay Android project will include the libraries of Liferay screens inside the project. So to do that, I'm going to copy the needed file and add it inside the build.gradle file. As you can see here, I did import for the dependency for the screens, and also I did imports to other view sets. The view sets is what I was talking about during the presentation about the view layer. So the view sets, it can give you different look and feel for each screenlet. So you can build your own views to make those screenlet look and behave as the same as your native application. So I'm gonna use default view set that was created by Liferay, but you can always create your own views. So after you add the dependency, what you need to do is to sync your project. So can Liferay, the Android project, can import the libraries. And after you finish this and you can see everything is okay, the next thing you can do, which is the last step, is to add the server configuration inside your Android application. So to do that, you go to your REST folder and you go to the values, and then you need to create this folder, this file. Which is server_context.xml. Once you have that files open, you need to add the server information, which is inside this XML. So let me explain this XML. First, you need to add the server information, the server URL. So in my example here, the server is running on my local host. And if you are an Android developer, you may know that the local host in Android developer, it's right as 10.0.2.2. And this is the port where my Liferay server is running. The second is the company ID. The company ID is actually Liferay Instant ID. Let's see how we can get this ID. So once you log in as an admin user, you can actually go to the control panel, and under the control panel you can go to the configuration, and then you can go to the instance settings. You can go to the virtual instance, and here you can get the ID that you need. And you can copy this ID and add it inside the company ID. Next is the group ID. To get the group ID, it's actually your site ID. So you need to go to the site where you want your native application to connect to. In my case, I will connect to the front site, which is Liferay DXP. And then you go to the configuration, then site settings, and then you copy this ID. So this is gonna be your group ID. Finally, it's the Liferay version. In my use case here, I'm using DXP, so that's why I add server version 7. Alright, so after doing these two steps, now my Liferay is ready to start getting resources created in Liferay inside my native app. So let's start creating the first screenlet in my project, which is the login screenlet. So I'm going to my layouts, and I'm gonna open my activity main, and here I'm gonna include my login screenlet. So I'm gonna copy this code and put it here. So this is my login screenlet here. As you can see, I need also to define the Liferay values. So I need to include this here as well. And here, as you can see, this is my login screenlet. Inside my login screenlet, there is some attribute coming from Android, which is the default, that shows what can be the size of this screenlet. And there is attribute coming from Liferay. For example, there is an attribute that can help you to define if you want to do authentication against Liferay instance using the screen names or using the email. Also, you can define if you want to save the user credential inside Liferay or not. Auto mean that the user will have the option to either store it or not. Finally, you have the layout ID. And as you can see here, in the layout ID, you can actually define the view that you want this screenlet to look like. I'm using the default one, which is the material. So let's see how that looks like. I'm going to run my application and choose the device that I want. Right? You can see here the login screenlet show with the sample view. So let's see if I wanna change the look and feel of this screenlet. So I can include another view that I already added at the beginning of this demo, which is the Wistro view. So doing this and running my application again, you can see it's completely looks different. So you can always create your own view and you can include it in your Liferay screenlet so that it behaves and look exactly as the same as your app. In the next step, I'm going to implement the listener inside the activity class so that they can listen to the event triggered from the login screenlet, like successfully login or fail to login, and then trigger some events. Like in my use case here, when I'm successfully login, I'm gonna move to the next activity. If I didn't add the credential right, it's gonna show me an error message. So let's do that. I'm gonna open the Java classes for the first activity. And the first thing I need to do here, I need to implement the listener for the login screenlet. And after I implement the listener, you can see here that those are the two events that I'm actually gonna catch them and then do certain actions. So either on login success or on login failure. Next, I need to make my activity to listen to the event triggered by the screenlet. So to do this, I'm going to create a new instance from the screenlet. And I'm gonna look for this ID on my activity, which is the same ID that I define when I add my activity. And then I'm gonna make the activity class to listen this screenlet. Finally, I'm gonna define my action with when those events will be triggered. So here, when I'm successfully logged in, I'm gonna actually make my activity move to the next one. And if I fail to log in, I'm gonna show an error message. Alright, so I'm gonna show a message, login failed, please try again. Note that this is actually red because I didn't create the second activity yet. So let's create the second activity. So I'm gonna create a new empty activity and I'm gonna make it activity 1. So now if I went back to my other class, you can see now this is not red anymore. So let's try that. I'm gonna run my application again. Right? So first I'm gonna enter a wrong username and password. You can see I got the error message that I designed. Now I will enter the right username and password. You can see it moved me to the next activity, which is a blank activity for now. The next step on the blank activity, I'm going to add the DDL form screenlet to consume a form from my Liferay instance. So let's do that. So I'm gonna take the DDL form screenlet code. I'm gonna go to the activity one and add this here. I need to define the Liferay value. Right? So this is the DDL screenlet. So let's see Liferay attributes here. So the first attribute is the layout ID that I talked about it during the login screenlet, where you can define what view you want for this screenlet. I'm gonna leave the default one. Second, you can define the cache policy. So for example, you can make your application not every time connecting to Liferay to get the form. It always look in the cache, and if it exists a valid cache for the forms, it's gonna show this from the cache instead of connecting to Liferay, in case you want to have a much better performance, so not every user connecting to Liferay to get the form. So I have a lot of option here. The two required fields that you have is the record set ID and the structure ID. In the record set ID, you actually add the ID of the form, and then you add the structure of the fields of this form. So let's see how we can get that. So in my Liferay instance, I'm gonna go to dynamic form, and I will consume the service request inside my app. So I'm gonna copy this ID and add it inside the record ID. For the structure ID, I will go to the data definition for the fields of this forms and add the ID of this fields. So if I open the service request, those are the fields of this form. Right. By doing this, I'm ready to have this form in my native application. So let's see that. First, I'm gonna log in with an existing user, and that moves me to the form. So let me add valid data here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going back here to the form data entries, and you can see this is only the data that I have in my form. So let's add a new user here. So I'm gonna add myself. Reset my password. Okay, and then I'm gonna submit this. So if I just refresh this page here, you can see there is a new data entry from my native app got saved inside my Liferay instance. The nice thing also of using Screenlet, you can always change a lot of things inside your native app without the need to redeploy your application. So let's take an example for that. Let's say for this form, you decided you want to add a new field or change anything in this form. So you can simply do that without redeploying your app. So I'm going inside Liferay instant inside my fields, And in my field here, I decided to change this instead of additional details to be additional information. And I decided to add a new field. Right, so I changed my form, click Save. So what I'm gonna do, I didn't redeploy anything. I'm just gonna go back and log in again. And you can see now my changes got reflected here. So I can see all my changes here now. The other thing also you can do is inside the activity, you can listen to event triggered from the DDL form and actually do an action. So for example, if someone tried to update a record or add a record, you can do action for doing this. Since we already show how you can make your activity listen to event triggered by your screenlet during the login screenlet, I'm gonna skip that part. The last thing I wanna show in this demo is to show a third screenlet, which is the web content screenlet. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm going to remove this screenlet. I'm gonna get the code of the web screenlet. And I will add this here. So I will consume web content from Liferay instance inside my native application. So to do this, I'm gonna consume these photos that I created previously. So I need to click Edit, and I'm gonna copy this ID and add this ID inside the article ID. Since this article ID wasn't created by any structure or a template, I'm gonna put the values here to be 0. Now I'm gonna run my application for the last time. I will log in with my admin user. And you can see now I was able to consume the web content inside my native application. So in this demo, you saw how easy I can integrate Liferay screens to your native application and get resources and information created in your instance inside your native application and manage everything from one place, which is your Liferay platform. In the next video, I will show how you can use Liferay hybrid development and the new screenlet that we created that's called Web Screenlet.